In this video, we're going to walk through Jupyter Notebooks, including some of its basic functions and shortcuts. Jupyter Notebook is useful because it allows you to combine formatted text and executable code. It's kind of like if you could write Python code in a Word document and execute it along with text and images and so on. So it's useful when teaching, and I like programming in it as well because of the way that you can organize snippets of code and rearrange them and so on. You'll see what I mean in just a second. So what we're looking at here is a Jupyter Notebook file, and specifically I'm coding inside code spaces, GitHub code spaces, which is essentially Microsoft VS Code with the Jupyter Notebook extension installed. Like a column in Excel, the content of a Jupyter Notebook is segmented into cells. Cells come in two types, code cells and markdown cells. The type of a cell determines how its content is interpreted by the notebook. Right now, we're looking at a markdown cell. You can't see it yet, but this cell contains markdown syntax that affects its formatting. You can open a markdown cell by double-clicking on it, and then you can execute it by holding Shift and pressing Enter. So we'll give that a try right now. I'm going to double-click on this markdown cell, and you'll see that it opens up, and now you can see the markdown syntax, which is hidden after the cell is executed, like these symbols that are formatting my header and the link to this address. If I hold Shift and hit Enter, then I execute that cell. The markdown formatting is applied to the text, and we just see the formatted version. If you want to learn more about markdown syntax so that you can use it in Jupyter Notebooks, we have a guide right here, markdownguide.org/basic syntax, and there's another section of this website on more advanced syntax. We'll link this in the description of the video. So this is a markdown cell. Right below, we have a code cell. Like a markdown cell, you can execute code cells by holding Shift and pressing Enter. And any output of the code inside this code cell will appear beneath the cell after it's executed. So I'm going to execute this cell right now by holding Shift and pressing Enter. And since this is the first time that I'm trying to execute a code cell inside Jupyter Notebooks, it's going to prompt me to select a Python environment, and I'm going to pick Python 3.12.1. Once I do, Jupyter will execute the code cell and give me my output. 2 + 2 = 4. The blue cursor that you see on the left-hand side of my screen right here indicates your current cell selection. You can move the cursor up and down with your arrow keys, so I can hit the up arrow key to move up, the down arrow key to move down. I've mentioned that you can execute a cell by holding Shift and Enter. When I do that, I'm going to do it right now. Notice what happens to my blue cursor on the left. I'm going to hold Shift and hit Enter. My cursor moves downward. If I want to execute a cell without advancing the cursor downward, I can hold Control and press Enter. That will execute my current selected cell and keep my cursor in the same place. I'm going to hold Control and hit Enter, and my cell is executed, but the cursor remains in the same place. When we double-clicked on the markdown cell above, we went into edit mode in Jupyter Notebook. I can do it right here. If I double-click the cell, now I'm in edit mode where I can edit the contents of the cell that I have selected. When I am outside of edit mode, I'm in command mode. When you're in Jupyter Notebooks, you're using one of these two modes, edit mode or command mode. Instead of clicking with your mouse, you can enter edit mode to change the content of your selected cell by pressing Enter. And when you enter edit mode, you'll see a blue border appear around the selected mode. I'm going to do that right now. If I hit Enter, I enter edit mode, you'll see a blue border appear around my cell. If I want to return to command mode, I can do that by pressing the Escape key. If I go down to this code cell and I hit Enter, I will enter into edit mode, and you'll see a blue border appears around this cell as well, which is more subtle than entering edit mode with a markdown cell. If I hit Escape, that blue border goes away. Right now, I'm going to go in to this first line of code and write my first name, and this cell will print, your first name is Zach. Now we're going to talk about creating and manipulating cells in Jupyter Notebook. You can create new cells by clicking the plus code and plus markdown buttons in the toolbar at the top of the screen here. The same buttons appear when you hover your mouse over the bottom of any cell. Like right here, if I hover my mouse over the bottom of this cell, I see the plus code and plus markdown buttons. New cells created using these buttons will appear directly beneath the selected cell. So if I click plus code, I get a new code cell beneath my selected cell. Now you'll see my cursor is highlighting this cell, this new code cell. Now if I press plus markdown, a new markdown cell will appear beneath my code cell. If I want to delete these cells that I made, I have to exit edit mode. Right now I'm in edit mode. There's a blue border around my selected cell. If I hit delete, nothing happens. Why is that? It's because if I have typed some text inside this cell and I hit delete, Jupyter Notebook is going to interpret that to mean that I want to delete the text. If I hit escape and return to command mode and have this cell highlighted with my cursor, then hit delete, it will disappear. So if I hit delete while in command mode, I'll delete the selected cell. Instead of using the plus code and plus markdown buttons to create new cells, if I'm in command mode, I can insert a new cell below my selected cell by pressing the B key. I can also insert a new code cell above my selected cell by pressing the A key. So if I hit B, I'll get a new code cell beneath my selected cell. Now if I move back up, notice where my cursor is, and I hit A, I'll create a new code cell above my selected cell. The M key will convert a code cell into a markdown cell, and the Y key will convert a markdown cell into a code cell. So if I take one of these new code cells I created and hit M, it will become a markdown cell. If I take this markdown cell and hit Y, it'll become a code cell. You'll notice that I don't have a shortcut to insert a new markdown cell beneath or above my selected cell. So if I want to create a new markdown cell, the way I would do that is I would hit B to create a new code cell below, and then I'd transform it into a markdown cell with the M key. When I'm in command mode, I can drag the cell that I have selected up and down by holding Alt and then pressing up and down on the arrow key. So I can hold Alt, press the up arrow key, and I will drag this cell up. I can press the down arrow key and I'll drag it down. Then once I release the Alt key, I can press up and down and that cell will stay in place. In command mode, I can copy, cut, and paste cells using C, X, and V. And in Jupyter Notebook, in command mode, it's not necessary to hold the control key. I just press the letters. So I can copy this cell with C, and I can paste it below this line with V. Notice that pasted cells will appear below the cell that you have selected. So my cursor is on this line. If I hit V, the cell I copied appears below the line. When I'm in command mode, I can highlight multiple cells by holding Shift and moving the cursor up and down with the arrow keys, which is similar to Excel. If I press the Escape key, I will deselect the cells I've highlighted. So I can come up here and highlight the cell I copied and the line in the original cell by holding Shift and pressing the up arrow key. If I want to deselect these cells, I hit the Escape key and they're deselected. So this would be useful if I wanted to copy and paste my cells somewhere else without having to repeat the copy and paste for each cell individually. It would also be useful if I wanted to delete all of them at once. As a final shortcut, when I'm in command mode, I can undo the last action that I performed in command mode by pressing the Z key. If I do that right now, I will undo that delete. As a note, when you're in edit mode, you have to hold Control and then press Z in order to undo. And the reason for that is if I'm in edit mode and I press Z, Jupyter Notebook is going to think that that means I want to type the letter Z. If I want to undo, I have to hold Control and then hit Z. In the background of every Jupyter Notebook, a piece of software called a kernel is processing code and keeping track of your variables. As long as the kernel remains active, it'll recognize references to variables defined earlier. So you'll remember, maybe, in these cells toward the top of our notebook, we defined X here and Y here. Because this kernel has remained active, if I make a reference to X and Y in this code cell below, the kernel will remember the values of those variables. I can restart my kernel by clicking the Restart button up here in the toolbar. As a separate step, I can clear the outputs. You'll notice that they're still here beneath my cell. I can clear my outputs by clicking Clear All Outputs in the toolbar. Once I do that, the kernel will not recognize any variables unless I re-execute the cells containing their definitions. If I try to execute this code cell right here, I'm going to get an error. The interpreter is telling me that the name of this variable x has not been defined. Even though I did write a definition in this code cell up here, since I restarted the kernel, I have not yet executed it. So the kernel doesn't know what that variable's value is. If you want to see a list of variables that are defined in the current kernel, you can click the Variables button in the toolbar. We can see here that I don't have any variables defined, so I'm going to hide that, go back up to where I defined x and re-execute that cell, and y and re-execute that cell. Now if I go back down to where I referenced these variables, if I execute this cell, I see that the kernel remembers their values. If I click on the Variables button, I see that these variables' values are defined in the current kernel. Now I have a reference to the first name variable that I defined up here. Since I haven't executed this cell yet, if I executed the cell containing a reference to this variable, I would get another name error. So I could scroll back up to the top where I defined the variable and then execute it and scroll back down. But if I didn't want to do that, I could execute all of my cells in this Jupyter Notebook by clicking on the Run All button that you see right here. When I click that, all of my cells will be executed in sequence. And then when this bottom cell is executed, the kernel knows the value of first name and can say, oh, that's right, your first name is Zach. Nice to meet you. This has been PyFi's Jupyter Notebook tutorial. If you found it useful, then please give the video a like and subscribe to our channel. My name is Zach, and I'll see you in the next video.